He understands that if the person in front of him really killed all his men, it would mean that Peter was never here in the first place. Even the idea that his men were killed by someone like this seems utterly absurd. He also wonders what the reason would be for someone like that to attack them in the first place. The tattooed man started threatening Peter, warning him about the gun, saying it wasn't a toy. He told Peter that if he valued his life, he needed to start talking and reveal Peter's location immediately. Peter, in that moment, noticed that both the gunman and the girl were ready to kill him at any second with just one signal from the octopus tattooed man. Peter responded sarcastically, "Oh, so you really want to know where he is, huh?" The tattooed man replied, "Yes, please, if it won't be too much trouble." Peter then told him that the only way to find out where Peter is would be for the tattooed man to kill Peter himself. The tattooed man said, "Why didn't you just say so from the start? That's my specialty." He immediately ordered his man to shoot Peter, but told him to leave him breathing so he could suffer longer. At that very moment, when the shooter was about to pull the trigger, Peter quickly threw one of his chopsticks with lightning speed, hitting a vital point on the man, killing him instantly. The girl was in complete shock, wondering how someone like Peter could hit such a vital point with terrifying accuracy from that far away. Calmly, Peter picked up another chopstick, replaced the one he threw, and resumed eating as if nothing had happened. The girl started thinking that the person in front of her, someone around her age, had skills unlike anyone else around, possibly even in the whole continent. Meanwhile, the tattooed man grew even more furious and sarcastically complimented Peter's lucky shot, which he found impressive. He then said, since people like Peter are rare these days, how about he joins him? In an instant, the tattooed man pulled out his gun and shot at Peter without much thought. On the other side, Peter quickly flipped the table to shield himself from as many bullets as possible. The tattooed man laughed mockingly at Peter, saying he was still young and inexperienced because tables couldn't block bullets. It became clear to everyone, including the tattooed man, that Peter had been hit, as blood started pooling on the floor. The tattooed man gave Peter one last chance to reveal his location, as Peter's voice weakened, groaning in pain. The tattooed man told him it wasn't time for him to die yet. He needed to know where Peter was first. The tattooed man rushed behind the table to find Peter, but to his shock, all he found was spilled sauce on the floor that he had mistaken for Peter's blood. By the time he circled around the column to check, Peter had completely disappeared. The tattooed man started doubting himself, wondering if from the beginning he had been chasing nothing more than a ghost. But when he looked up, shock appeared on his face. Peter had been clinging to the ceiling the whole time. In an instant, Peter poured all the hot sauce directly onto the tattooed man's face, temporarily blinding him. This gave Peter enough time to grab his weapon and disassemble it into useless parts. Then, with a powerful slap to the face, Peter knocked him down. At that moment, all that was going through the tattooed man's mind was that he couldn't see anything anymore, and the person attacking him was moving far too quickly for him to keep up. He wondered how this devil in front of him could be just a regular student. Peter's overwhelming presence began to dominate the tattooed man's mind. Moving with terrifying speed, Peter grabbed the tattooed man's head and twisted it 180 degrees, intending to kill him. The tattooed man fell to the ground, and it seemed Peter had defeated him in less than 5 minutes. However, the tattooed man was still alive, and as he lay there, he thought to himself, how could this be happening to him? He had fought tougher opponents in the past, yet this was the first time he had encountered someone with such brute strength in their youth. The tattooed man started recalling his training with the organization when he was younger. They had trained him to always develop his own unique tactic, because there would inevitably come a time when they'd have to face someone stronger. That's why they needed to use a tactic that maximized their own advantages. As the tattooed man remembered this, he began to realize the meaning behind his mentor's words and understood how to fully use his body's special capabilities. His hypermobility, a terrifying trait he had discovered during training. His mentor had told him that the most dangerous moment in a fight is when you turn your back on the enemy, believing you've won. The tattooed man had never lost a fight since mastering this unique physical advantage. In that moment, he regained consciousness, grabbed Peter with all his strength, and began using his hypermobility to encircle Peter completely. In a split second, Peter found himself trapped in the octopus-like grip of the tattooed man's deadly technique. The tattooed man spoke with a sharp tone, saying, "I was slaughtering and exterminating humans before you were even born, you foolish brat. So, who do you think you are to believe you're more experienced than me? You arrogant newcomer? Do you now understand what I meant? Enjoy your pathetic death." At that point, it seemed like Peter was fully caught in the tattooed man's deadly web. But then Peter's voice suddenly cut through the tension, saying, "Will you really stay lying on the ground like that for much longer?" The tattooed man was utterly shocked by the voice he heard. When he looked up, he found Peter standing there, perfectly unharmed. He realized that the person he had been holding earlier wasn't Peter at all. It was, in fact, his own loyal servant, whom he had unknowingly killed, thinking it was Peter. The tattooed man couldn't believe what had just happened and wondered how he had failed to notice such a crucial detail from the beginning. He had used the same tactic for decades and had never lost, so what had changed now? At that moment, the tattooed man began to recognize the stark difference between himself and the person standing before him. He knew without a doubt that his death was now inevitable at Peter's hands. He also began to think that the person standing in front of him might be on the same level as the legendary hunters, or perhaps even more terrifying than that. He feared that Peter might surpass even them in strength. Out of desperation, the tattooed man started backing away, attempting to negotiate with Peter. He offered him the girl who had been with him, begging Peter to spare his life in exchange for her. He admitted that while she might not seem very valuable, she could still be useful in some way. The girl, terrified, pleaded with the tattooed man to leave her alone, saying she didn't want to be sacrificed. But the tattooed man silenced her harshly, telling her to shut up as he was in the middle of important negotiations. Then, Peter gave an answer that shocked both the tattooed man and the girl. He agreed, saying, "Honestly, she's cute." Peter, with his typical wit, told the tattooed man that, as expected from a member of the Glory Club, they would finish the negotiations quickly. The tattooed man, in relief, let the girl go and attempted to flee for his life. He told Peter to take the girl and disappear forever, promising he would change his ways and that Peter could do whatever he wanted with her. All the tattooed man was thinking about in that moment was gathering enough information about Peter so he could kill him later. But before he could escape, Peter spoke in a sharp tone. "Your special technique, boy." The tattooed man, confused, didn't understand what Peter was talking about. Peter continued, "Your special technique states that if you turn your back on the enemy, thinking you've won, you will meet your death right where you stand." The tattooed man suddenly recalled the exact words his mentor had told him long ago, the same words that Peter was now repeating. He felt a deep sense of dread as Peter's words hit him, reminding him of the lessons from his past. Peter then revealed his identity, confirming that he was indeed Peter, the one who had killed all of the tattooed man's men. He also declared his intention to reclaim the 7 billion that were owed to him. The tattooed man couldn't believe or even imagine that what was happening could be real. This was because, in that time period, his own mentor had been none other than the legendary Peter himself. At the moment when the tattooed man understood everything, he recalled the most important saying in the organization. The moment one discovers the truth about Peter, they never survive. True to this, Peter began attacking him at an incredible speed, breaking every part of the tattooed man's body in the blink of an eye. Even if the tattooed man had enhanced movement, there wasn't a single major bone left intact to support him. As we expected from the previous video, the tattooed man was completely defeated. At the same time, in one of the tall buildings, a person from the organization received information that the tattooed man had been eliminated and that all surveillance systems had been disabled. There was no evidence left behind. This made the person also suspect that the one responsible must be the old man, Peter. But the real question was, How could an old man of that age still be capable of such feats? As if he were a young man, he had eliminated 4 people without leaving a single trace behind. Indeed, as they say, Peter was worth the bounty on his head, and he truly belonged to the elite of the elite. The unknown figure ordered his assistant to find out everything about the rogue members of the Glory Club, as the blood of the old man had become fair game for everyone. The bounty on his head had now been made public for all. But that wasn't the only thing. What happened next in the city was beyond anyone's imagination. At that very moment, all the screens in the city began showing something unusual. Peter could see it too. Every screen started displaying an image of Old Man Peter, presented as an elderly man in need, with a donation number listed as 7.6 billion. You probably get the message behind this. It was a public announcement to all members of the Glory Club, spreading Peter's information among the masses. Peter then muttered to himself with a sly grin, "You crazy people, no need to search for me. I'll save you the effort and come to you myself." However, for Peter to successfully execute his plan and destroy the Glory Club, he needed help from a certain individual. The person Peter was referring to was, in fact, something you wouldn't believe. It was that dog you see before you now in the image. And so, the story of John Wick officially begins. At the same time, in a secluded bathroom, Peter entered to find beggars and the homeless sleeping everywhere. He quickly realized that the place was, in fact, a hidden den. The homeless population had drastically increased since the last time he came here. He stood in front of a solid wall and seemed to be searching for something between the ads for organ trade and tobacco sales. Sure enough, as soon as he pressed one of the tiles on the wall, a hidden door appeared, leading to one of the underground chambers. Naturally, as Peter descended below, he was shocked by the scene before him. He knew this place, this room, was the most incredible thing he'd ever seen, and that everything here was worth multiple fortunes, not just one. But at that moment, the person Peter had come to meet began to corner him with a weapon, causing Peter to start talking to this person, saying, "Are you going to keep wearing those mismatched clothes your whole life? That's not going to be good for the blind lady," referring to the woman Peter had come to meet. She began to tell him it had been a very long time since she had killed anyone, and then she started using her sense of smell. Just by that sense alone, she could tell the person in front of her was youthful. Since she couldn't smell any alcohol on him, that definitely meant he wasn't one of the homeless people above. He could either be a spy or have come here with murderous intent. She immediately attacked Peter, assuming that Glory's club had sent him here. However, with every swift and unnatural attack she aimed at Peter, especially considering she was blind, he was able to dodge each one successfully. This made the woman completely lose her patience due to Peter's constant evasion. She threw her weapon at him with all her speed. "This lady is lethal," thought Peter, but once again, he managed to dodge her attack flawlessly. As if he were in the Matrix, Peter began to feel curious about her abilities, wondering if she was really blind. She attacked him with all her might, shouting, "Have you never seen a blind woman before, sweetheart?" But what happened next was unexpected for her. Peter caught her in midair while she was flying toward him and slammed her down to finish her off. In response, the crazy lady admitted to Peter that she had never seen a follower of Glory's club with skills like his, and asked him why he had such a murderous intent, or if he enjoyed preying on the disabled and helpless. She told him he had to be careful because failure wasn't an option in this line of work. She began calling out to someone named Alexander, who turned out to be her dog, a terrifying creature that looked like it could rip Peter apart. But once again, luck was on Peter's side. Instead of attacking him, Alexander relaxed completely and even started playing with Peter. After spending some time with the crazy lady, Peter began explaining everything that was happening, telling her that he had, in fact, been reborn. She couldn't believe it. How could someone be reborn? She started feeling his face to check, and sure enough, she noticed that his skin had returned to its youthful state, as he had said, and the smell of old age had completely left him. Peter continued, "Open your mind already. I've been telling you the same thing for an hour." She threw herself on the ground, asking Peter how he died and demanding to know the secret right away. When she thought about it, she understood that it was impossible for the dead to be the main occupation, so she started asking him how he died. Did he die from a knife or a gunshot? She wanted to know how to regain her youth. Peter honestly responded, "I've been calling you a woman from the start because I knew you were older, but there's something sweet about a woman who's young too." This made Peter tap her lightly on the head to stop her headache a bit and calm her down. She began to ask him about what he had said earlier, that he wanted to join Glory's club himself. When she asked how he planned to do that, Peter told her he would use the Eye of the Storm. Curiously, the lethal woman asked him what this Eye of the Storm was. Peter started explaining that the Eye of the Storm was a tactic, since all the Glory Club's lunatics wanted to kill him. He planned to join them to stay informed about their movements and everything around them. He could only do this if he became one of the Glory Club's lunatics. She responded, "You must be crazy to think about that." After contemplating for a moment, she realized that it could actually work. Given that he had become younger, they wouldn't recognize him. If he wanted to be one of their lunatics, that meant they would aim to kill Peter while the real Peter would be playing with them directly, which she found terrifying. She told him that, unfortunately, while this was a nice idea, he knew it was also nearly impossible to happen. To be one of the Glory Club's lunatics, you had to be trained in their special facility. Even if Peter the old man had come from that facility, that didn't mean that Peter the young man would also be accepted or recognized. Therefore, it would be impossible to join them as a professional killer. This made Peter laugh and say, "Actually, there's only one way." He then shifted the scene to a school where all the girls were talking about a dazzling light that had recently appeared in their school. They could hardly believe that such beauty and charm existed on Earth. Peter's plan was to join Glory High School, and his alias there would be Kim Sung. Wow! This name isn't a problem at all, he thought. It was the third time he had used it, but he felt he had monopolized the name. The girls were saying that Kim's skin, which was Peter's skin, was whiter than theirs. Then one of the girls approached Peter and said they had to go to the gym immediately at the principal's request. Peter replied, "Of course," and with the name of the school being Glory High, it was clear to him that the high school was established by the Glory Club or the Glory Organization. While to the public it appeared to be an ordinary secondary school, the reality was far different. It was essentially a training camp for assassins. There was a class of assassins within the school, and no ordinary student was allowed to enter. Peter's goal in attending the school was to become a student in that class, so he could join the lunatics of the Glory Club. He was confident and determined that he would be part of that class regardless of their intentions. When he arrived, all the students were in the gym talking with Peter and the older woman. She told him that the information indicated that only members of the Glory Club were allowed in the class he wanted to join. She asked if Peter had any other plans, which made him think to himself that he had only one plan: to be an exception and break their main rule. He knew it was too early to draw attention to himself. At that moment, the blind woman, whom he couldn't fathom how she could see him, noticed that Peter was trying to get on stage to do something crazy. Sure enough, Peter climbed up and began speaking into the microphone, saying, "I am Kim Sung, and I am a new transfer student here today." The students were confused and didn't understand what this kid was doing or what he was saying. Peter continued, stating that his hobby was fighting and that he specialized in it. At that moment, he shocked everyone by saying, "I am, in fact, an assassin." This statement hit the ears of all the teachers and students, even the older lady, like lightning. Peter's plan was to forcefully make one of the Iron class accept him, whether they liked it or not. Everyone present was stunned by the young man before them, and what he meant by wanting to be a killer. The old lady began shouting at Peter, claiming he looked younger but his mind was senile. Peter continued, "If you ask me what I want to be, I will say I want to be nothing but an assassin, and I excel in this field." In the blink of an eye, Peter's video began spreading everywhere. While the general public saw him as just a confused student who didn't know what he was saying, others understood the message he was trying to convey. At that moment, Some students, who appeared to harbor resentment toward Peter, approached him. I can't say if they were from the desired class or not, but then a guy named Karbish called out to Peter, referring to him as a killer, and asked if he had seduced his beloved Eugene. When Peter asked who he was talking about, Karbish was already crying, cursing Peter with every possible insult in his mind. This guy was Jang So, who had been searching for his beloved for a very long time, and he had finally found her, Baiseo, who was Eugene, the one he had mentioned a moment ago. They had been in a relationship for exactly 22 days. All the high school students called them the beautiful yet monstrous lovebirds, but today, unexpectedly, Peter had completely ruined that. Karbish wanted to take revenge on Peter before he lost his beloved completely. Peter was trying to convey to him that he hadn't done anything wrong. Jang the Giant was the one who had previously earned the title of the Iron Fist because he could control the Mobwood district with his own strength. However, for the first time in many years, he felt a sensation he had never experienced before, and death was staring him in the face. At that moment, Jang realized he wouldn't be able to protect his beloved anymore because he was about to bid farewell to life. Come on, man. You've only known her for 22 days. Nothing more, he thought. All Peter did was a very light punch. It was nothing more than a simple jab to Gang's face, which caused him to fall to the ground and made him the subject of ridicule from everyone around. At that moment, his friends were also shocked by what happened, leading them to think that it was impossible for this guy or any of the students around him to be from the killer class. Suddenly, one of the teachers appeared holding a red card, thinking he was Captain Metachalabi, and asked Peter how he could fight one of the students on school grounds. He asked him about his father's whereabouts, to which Peter replied that he wasn't around because he was in a better place, the grave. The teacher began to reprimand him for bullying the students on his first day at school, even if he didn't have parents. While Gang was shouting, "Let me go, guys," and showing his friends that no one was holding him, a group of students from the killer class were watching what happened. They decided that they needed to take action regarding Peter, and the first idea exchanged among them was to gather information about him. But one student suggested, "What information? Let's just cut his rope and end it now." As the teacher was dragging Peter by his cheek through the school corridors, they passed by one of the students, a girl from before, who was completely shocked and terrified because she knew the fear that the person in front of her had caused her previously. All she could think of was that he had come here to wipe out the entire school. At that moment in the school lounge, there was a girl named Yuno, whom we will call Bill. Peter approached and asked for permission to sit next to her. He asked her why she was sitting alone, and she told him she had lost her appetite for food. Peter replied, "It's obvious, my dear, that you're sitting alone in the cafeteria." Bill started to recall what happened during that bloody night, when Peter warned her that if she wanted to live to see the next day, she had to tell the organization that the old man was the one who killed all the people in the place. Only in that case would they allow her to leave. She told him that she had indeed done everything he asked of her, and she asked why he had come to school. Peter answered that his reason for coming was not her, but Bill didn't believe him. She said, "You're lying to my face. Admit that you came here to continue your killing spree and to kill me, you madman." Peter replied, "You're stupid. I never said I came here for you." Then Bill started talking about the situation she was in, where the organization had her under surveillance, which wasn't comfortable for her at all. Peter told her, "Thank God you're still alive thanks to me." She asked if he meant he had saved her. Peter responded that her words showed her ignorance, and that if she knew the nature of the place they were in, she would realize that no one could survive in a jungle like this alone. Then Peter said to her, "And who said that I'm alone? You're definitely going to help me." When Bill asked why she should help him, he replied, "Because your situation shows your ignorance about the school for killers, and that's why I will depend on you, Bill." Bill was astonished at how he knew her real name, but as soon as she turned her face to confront him, Peter had already disappeared from the spot, using his invisibility technique. It was a time of year when various sports started at school, beginning with track and field, where Johnson was the school's star runner, trained under extremely high pressure to claim the title of the best runner in Korea at the Glory High School. He had the ability to run 400 meters in under an hour, making him the fastest runner in the school. Unfortunately, his dream was now empty and hopeless because of the new transfer student, whom we know as our hero, Peter. At the moment he was finishing what he was doing, he was being assisted by a whole team of cute girls who were helping him with whatever he needed and dreamed of. If you look from afar, you would see a person hidden, watching Peter and all his movements. During the vision test, Peter unexpectedly had an extraordinarily sharp vision that was above normal human levels. In a cooking test, Peter's use of kitchen tools was so high that he created artistic plates. Throughout this time, someone had been observing Peter and all his movements, as I mentioned, from outside the school or the playground or at the trash area where they throw the waste. There were 3 students whose task was to clean the garbage due to the bullying they had done inside the school, and this was their punishment. They began threatening the teacher who was supposed to supervise them, saying that he had nothing to do with them, and that the most he could do was deduct points from them. The teacher, in a state of shock, couldn't believe what was happening. How these students could treat him this way and speak so horribly. They even threatened him, causing all the students to laugh mockingly at their teacher. They recorded a video of the teacher asking one of the students where the student's father got his money from or what job he did, editing the video in a way that made the teacher seem like he was hurting the students' feelings and provoking them to threaten him later. When the teacher asked how they could mock him like that when he had the authority to expel them from school, the students laughed at him and his authority, even pushing him to the ground. They cared little about their grades in that school. As for the teacher, this would be a huge problem because it affected his livelihood, and if he wanted this not to happen to him, he had to stop messing around with them and keep his distance from them from that moment on. At that moment, Peter was approaching from afar, and when the students saw him, they began to ridicule all the things he had said earlier about wanting to be a killer. All he appeared to be was a frightened boy. Peter asked them if they really bullied the teacher, and they saw that he was talking to them as if he were older and wiser, and he ordered them to disappear from in front of him if they didn't want to end up in the trash. Peter then said, "No, sorry, my dear. I want to see what you'll do to me now." Immediately, one of the boys spat on Peter's clothes and continued to mock him. In that moment, Peter looked at him with sharp and furious eyes, threatening him for the last time that if he didn't want to be buried there, he had better disappear quickly or he would kill him. The student then attacked Peter with all his strength, but Peter managed to dodge his attack effortlessly. All the punches thrown at Peter were easily avoided, and while the student's friends laughed at him, Peter counterattacked with a single kick, knocking him to the ground. When the student tried to come from behind and hit him with a rock on the head, Peter quickly turned around and crushed the rock with his fist. After he dealt with those kids, he ordered them to apologize to the teacher. They left, telling Peter that a believer doesn't get bitten by the same snake twice, and that next time they would take care of him completely. Peter then asked the teacher if he was okay, but all he said was, "Why do you think that because you defended me? What you just did will just be overlooked." Peter ignored him and bent down to pick up the phone that had fallen to the ground. At the moment he was watching the recorded video on the phone, behind Peter was the teacher, Rashid himself, in shock over something he was certain about concerning Peter from the beginning. This was after Peter managed to block his surprise attack effortlessly, and he began to tell the teacher that he was definitely, it's impossible for him to be an ordinary student, he thought. This was evidence of his words, especially since not a single drop had fallen from his cup while he was fighting off the troublesome boys. He began to ask Peter where he learned all this and the real reason he had learned these techniques. Peter, with a terrifying tone, told him that all he wanted was the hawk. Of course, Peter wanted the hawk from the Glory Club in a fit of rage, but didn't say that to the teacher because he knew he was a member of that club. All he said was that he wanted the hawk because his family had been robbed of everything, his home and his wealth. "I have nothing left, teacher." The teacher then offered Peter the chance to join his volunteer club. Peter was actually looking for this opportunity from the start, waiting specifically for the moment when the teacher would reveal himself. He knew all along that he was being watched from afar, as he was aware from the beginning that this was the teacher of killing in the Glory Club. The teacher explained that in the school they were in, there was a special club for practicing killing activities. correcting himself to mean volunteer activities, implying to Peter that only a few students had been selected, like the rare things Peter was currently doing. However, despite all this, it wouldn't be as easy as he thought. This was the moment Peter had been waiting for. As soon as the teacher opened the door, he would see the gathering of Glory Club members in the volunteer club. So, was what Peter saw on the other side the gathering of club members or students from the desired class? That's what we'll find out together in the next episode, God willing. Peter was eagerly waiting for the moment when the teacher would open the door to see the place referred to as the volunteer club, a place he had heard legends about since he first entered the school. But when the teacher finally opened the door, it was a real shock for him, and he couldn't believe that this was a place for actual fighters. From his current perspective, they seemed like just ordinary students. The teacher began to call the attention of all the students present to him and Peter, explaining that from this day forward, the student in front of them, Peter, would be joining them starting today. Bill was actually surprised at how he would be joining them when he wasn't one of the orphans from the Glory Club. But what happened next was that she found Peter staring at her, making her feel a bit frightened and causing her to think to herself and pray that what she was imagining would come true.